I was a huge fan of RoboCop back in the day. I remember watching the movie when I was way too young. Thanks, Dad, and it's our little secret I still haven't told Mom.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Man, that movie blew me away. I had RoboCop toys, comics, books, video games, you name it. I had all sorts of RoboCop stuff. I thought RoboCop was just the best. In fact, for one Halloween, I even distinctly remember dressing up as RoboCop. Although, sometimes I wonder if that's just me putting that memory in my head. I'll have to contact my mom and see if she still has pictures of me in that RoboCop costume.
Well, we couldn't find that one, but we did find me as Robin Hood. Man, what a cute little guy I was, huh?
And by the way, back when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones or digital cameras. You see, we actually had film cameras, Polaroids. You actually had to take a picture on film and then keep the physical photo itself. So if you didn't have a nice photo album to stick it in, we usually just kept it in shoeboxes. Ah, the golden era. Anyway, I was such a huge fan of RoboCop that it even inspired me to go out and buy the 6000 SUX luxury vehicle. Yes, that's right, I owned a 6000 SUX, and who cares that it only gets 8.2 gallons per mile. That thing was awesome. Man, I really love that car. So when I heard about the upcoming game RoboCop Rogue City, I was ecstatic with excitement. I'm just kidding, I didn't care at all. My obsession with RoboCop had ended decades ago, and hearing about a new RoboCop movie just brought up all those horrible memories of movie tie-in games from the past, because just about every movie tie-in game sucked. Needs to be warmed up. Anyway, but then I started hearing people talking about the game, saying how awesome it was. They loved RoboCop Rogue City. It was an amazing game, super awesome first-person shooter. Really did justice to the name RoboCop and the legacy of the RoboCop movies. Well, at least the first two, not the third one. So I thought, well, gee Willikers, maybe I'm making a mistake here by not checking it out, and I did what any good gamer would do. I got on the YouTubes and I started watching videos about the game. But then I noticed something dark, something disturbing, something horrifying, something that's actually in most games. Do you dream of digitally deleting an endless stream of white men? Well, RoboCop Rogue City is the game for you. You can not only play as the cyborg half-man, half-machine law enforcement officer, but you can also digitally delete, K-I-L-L, an endless stream of white men. Well, you might be thinking, come on, Fox, you know, RoboCop Rogue City, they just lack diversity. They're just not including diversity in the game because, you know, they didn't think to include other types of characters. Well, there you'd be wrong. There are quite a few officers and people in high positions of power in this game, good guys, and other characters who are not white. And yet, when you go to fight the criminals, it's nearly an endless stream of white men. Every now and then you'll see a dark-skinned character model, but you know what? That character model is just the white male character model with a darker color palette on it. And that's not how race works. You see, race goes way beyond skin deep. Race can be determined by your bones. Race is in your DNA, your genetics. Race can determine what diseases you suffer from or are potentially immune to. There are different medications for different races, believe it or not. And China has done some studies on race and, well, we're not gonna go there. So while many of the police officers and officials in this RoboCop game are Latino, Asian, possibly Middle Eastern, it's hard to tell sometimes, black, and possibly other races, mixtures of races, almost all the bad guys are straight up white. Isn't that weird? In fact, I can think of a lot of movies, TV shows, and video games where almost all the bad guys are white. Wonder why that is. But speaking of these mixed races, why don't we just take all the different races and kind of mix them all together into one giant clump? You know, you take all the crayons from the crayon box and you put them all in a melting pot and you melt them all together and you get this icky, sticky, gooey, blackish, brownish tar looking stuff. Isn't that better than having the individual crayon colors? Do you want each individual crayon color, or do you want just this mucky, mixed up mess of different colors that all end up being the same dark shade shade of blackish brown. So in a game with so much diversity, why are so many of the guys you shoot and punch white men? And you know, I was thinking, doesn't RoboCop take place in Detroit? Detroit, Michigan? Yes, it's a future Detroit. Detroit in the years 2043 and 2044, according to the original movie. And speaking of works of fiction that take place in the future, would you look at that? Here's my novel, New Tokyo by MarcFoxx. The rubber bands are just there to hold the cover together so it doesn't flare outward. But yes, my book takes place in the year 2117. That's a lot further into the future than 2043 or 44. That makes my book much better than RoboCop. So pick up your copy of New Tokyo today on Amazon in Kindle or paperback formats. And pro tip, if you just want to support me and you're not sure you're actually going to read the book, then believe it or not, the much cheaper Kindle version nets me a bigger profit. Anyway, if we look at the demographics for Detroit today, it's a city of about 78% black. The white population, not counting Hispanic, because for some reason they like to say that Hispanic and Latino are white. That's kind of confusing for most people. But the white population of Detroit as of today, when I just checked the Census Bureau, is about 10%. So 1 in 10 people in Detroit are white. Almost 8 out of every 10 people in Detroit are black. And yet in RoboCop Rogue City, nearly all of the criminals are white men. That doesn't make any sense. You see, if you look at the demographics of Detroit, that doesn't match. How in the world, in 20 years, does Detroit suddenly become a vast majority white city? That's not what they're even claiming, but that's what you would have to assume. But even more so, what if we look at the crime statistics? Let's look at crime demographics for Detroit. Let's look at crime demographics for the state of Michigan, where Detroit's located, and let's look at the crime demographics for the entire United States. Let's look at them by race. Actually, let's not. That's not a good idea. And no, the notion that the white population just suddenly skyrocketed exponentially, highly unlikely given that all indicators show white populations decreasing around the world. And just in case you didn't know, white people are a world minority of only about 8% of global population. Of all the major racial groups, that makes whites the smallest of minorities. Is RoboCop Rogue City a good game? Well, by most accounts, yes. It's got good graphics, great music and sound effects, good characters, the gameplay is solid and fun, it's got a decent story, it's got good voice acting, mostly. So what's wrong with RoboCop Rogue City? Well, it's the same thing that's wrong with a lot of media nowadays. It's anti-white. The developers knew that having RoboCop digitally delete an endless stream of criminals who actually look like the demographic of Detroit would probably garner them some criticism from the anti-gamer propagandists. Those are the people masquerading as journalists. Crap Taku, I'm looking at you. Make nearly all the enemies white and hardly anyone will notice or say a thing. In fact, even if you're white, you probably didn't notice, did you? Because you've been trained not to notice. It's okay if all the bad guys are always white. That's just the way it is, right? And have you complained about it to anybody? Oh, but Fox, you say, I'm a strong person. I'm not one of these weak sissies who needs a safe space. I don't get offended by things like that. That doesn't offend me at all. I'm strong. Well, that's good for you, except it's actually not good because you see, we live in the age of victimhood power. You don't gain power by saying how strong you are. You gain power and influence by playing victim, by saying how weak and victimized you are as a group. So by crying, I'm a victim, whether you are or aren't, that's how you get things to change. You complain about your victim status to those who have the power to make those changes. So the only way we will see changes made to better our people, my people group, is if we do what every other people group is doing. We band together and we make those complaints. We say we're offended. We're a victim group. We are a victim group. We've been victimized and we don't want to be victimized anymore. Stop victimizing us. No, it's not the safe choice to always make the bad guys white. Let's send that message to developers and publishers. And before you jump down the throat of the developers, let me just say this. More than likely, it's the publishers that are pushing this crap. Maybe the developers, it may maybe the developers too, but more than likely the publishers are the ones really pushing for this ESG, environmental, social, and governance nonsense. That's what most people refer to as woke. I don't like to call it woke. I think those people are quite well asleep. But wouldn't it be nice if they came out with games that accurately represented what's really going on in the world if they're trying to represent a realistic future version of the world? I mean, RoboCop, other than the idea of the cyborg man, is a fairly realistic movie and a series. They're trying to be reasonably realistic. It's not super crazy sci-fi. We're not flying around in cars above buildings that shoot fire out of them and dragons have come down. This isn't Shadowrun. This isn't Blade Runner. This is RoboCop. And if they made a version of RoboCop that more accurately represented the real state of crime in Detroit, well, I'd buy that for $1. Hey, thank you for joining me. I really, honestly do appreciate each and every one of you that watches my videos. And as always, make sure to gently, ever so gently caress or tap the like button. Please don't smash it. That's rude. That's mean. That like button does not appreciate being abused. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Notification bell icon. You know all that jazz. And as always, my friends, for Fox's sake, stay fresh, cheese bags.
Don't forget to grab your copy of New Tokyo, available on Amazon in Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback formats.
I'd buy that for $1.